I woke up on my kitchen floor with the taste of blood in my mouth and my vision blurring at the edges. The white marble tiles beneath me were cold, so cold that for a moment I thought maybe I'd died, and this was what the other side felt like. But then the pain hit. A sharp, brutal throbbing at the back of my skull that made me gasp and immediately regret the movement. I tried to lift my head, and the world tilted sideways. Nausea rolled through me in waves, and before I could stop it, I vomited right there on the floor I'd personally selected from a quarry in Carrara 3 years ago. My hands were shaking as I tried to push myself up. The copper taste in my mouth intensified, and I realized I'd bitten through my tongue when I fell. How long had I been lying here? The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows suggested late afternoon, but I'd been making tea around noon. 2 hours? 3? I couldn't remember the fall itself, just the sudden dizziness, the feeling of the floor rushing up to meet me, and then nothing. I needed help. My phone was on the counter, approximately 6 feet away, but it might as well have been 6 miles. I tried to stand, and my legs buckled immediately. The pain in my head exploded into something beyond description. I ended up crawling, dragging myself across the marble like a wounded animal, leaving a small trail of blood from where my head had cracked against the floor. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony through my skull. When I finally reached the counter and pulled myself up enough to grab my phone, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely unlock it. I dialed 911. The operator's voice sounded far away, like she was speaking to me from the bottom of a well. 911, what's your emergency? I fell, I managed to say, though my voice came out slurred, like I'd had too much wine. Hit my head. I'm bleeding. I live at... I gave her my address in Greenwich, the house Richard and I had bought 23 years ago, the house where I'd raised my son, where I'd built my life. Ma'am, I'm sending an ambulance right now. Can you tell me your name? Vivian Ashford. Even saying my own name felt like an enormous effort. Mrs. Ashford, I need you to stay on the line with me. Don't try to move. The paramedics are on their way. How bad is the bleeding? I touched the back of my head gingerly, and my fingers came away dark red. Bad, I whispered. It's bad. Stay with me, Vivian. Keep talking to me. Is anyone else home with you? No. I'm alone. My housekeeper doesn't come back until Monday. It was Saturday. I was completely alone in this 6,000-square-foot house. The irony wasn't lost on me, even through the fog of pain and fear. Everything after that became fragmented. The paramedics arriving, strong hands lifting me onto a stretcher, the ambulance siren, fluorescent hospital lights passing overhead in a nauseating blur. Voices talking over me, using words I didn't quite catch. And then darkness again, pulling me under like a riptide. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm and a woman in scrubs standing beside me. She had kind eyes, warm brown skin, and dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her name tag read, Helena Rodriguez, RN. Mrs. Ashford, she said gently, placing her hand over mine. You're at Greenwich Hospital. You've had a serious fall. You hit your head quite hard. We're going to need to keep you here for observation because there's a risk of internal bleeding. The words penetrated slowly through the haze. Risk of internal bleeding. Serious fall. I tried to sit up and she pressed me back down with gentle but firm hands. Easy, easy. You need to rest. Is there someone we should call? Family? Family. The word hit me harder than the fall had. My son, I said. Ethan. His number is in my phone. I looked around frantically. Where's my phone? Right here. Helena reached for the small table beside the bed and handed it to me. Would you like me to call him for you? I nodded, too exhausted to do it myself. I unlocked the phone with shaking fingers and pulled up Ethan's contact. Helena took the phone from me and stepped out into the hallway. I could hear her voice through the partially open door. Hello, is this Ethan? This is Helena Rodriguez. I'm a nurse at Greenwich Hospital. I'm calling about your mother, Vivian Ashford. There was a pause. Then Helena continued, her voice taking on a more urgent tone. She's had a serious fall. She hit her head very badly. Right now she's stable. But I need you to know that the situation is serious. If there are complications, if there's internal bleeding, she may not survive. Can you come to the hospital? The silence that followed felt endless. I waited for Helena to give him the room number, to tell him where to park, to say all the practical things nurses say to worried family members. Instead, what I heard made my blood run colder than any diagnosis could have. Helena's voice changed. The warmth drained out of it, replaced by something I couldn't quite identify. Shock, maybe, or disgust. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Another pause. Your mother is in the hospital with a potentially life-threatening head injury and you... She stopped mid-sentence. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the quiet of the hospital, I heard every word with perfect, devastating clarity. I see. Yes. I'll make note of that. Helena came back into the room, and the look on her face told me everything before she said a word. She was pale, her hand gripping my phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Mrs. Ashford, she began, then stopped. Started again. I spoke with your son. Is he coming? Even as I asked, I knew the answer. Helena's eyes filled with tears, not for herself, for me. No, she said quietly. He said his wife doesn't want him to come. He said if you die, to send him the address of the cemetery. The words didn't register at first. They couldn't be real. They were too cruel, too impossible. I must have heard wrong. The head injury must have affected my hearing, my comprehension. But Helena's expression told me I'd heard perfectly. He said what? My voice came out flat, emotionless. Shock, probably. I'm so sorry, Helena whispered. She was still holding my hand, and I realized she was squeezing it, like she could somehow transfer strength to me through touch alone. I shouldn't have told you. You need to rest. You need to... No, I cut her off. No, I need to know exactly what he said, word for word. Helena took a shaky breath. He said, my wife doesn't want me to come. If my mother dies, send me the address of the cemetery. Those were his exact words. 32 years. I had spent 32 years of my life raising that boy. 32 years of sacrifice, of working 70-hour weeks to build a business that could give him everything I never had. 32 years of ballet recitals I made time for, even when I was closing million-dollar deals, of parent-teacher conferences I attended despite jet lag from international flights, of college tuition payments that totaled over $240,000. 32 years of believing that despite my mistakes, despite the nannies and the business trips and the times I chose work over him, he was still my son and he still loved me. And in one sentence, he'd reduced all of it to nothing. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt something else rising in me, something cold and clear and absolutely certain. It was a feeling I recognized from my business days, from the boardrooms where I'd faced down investors who thought a woman couldn't handle commercial real estate, from the negotiations where I'd refused to back down even when everyone told me to take the lower offer. It was the feeling of knowing exactly what needed to be done and having the strength to do it. Mrs. Ashford? Helena's voice brought me back. Are you okay? Should I call the doctor? I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. The pain in my head was still there, sharp and insistent, but it felt distant now, unimportant. Helena, I need you to do something for me. Of course. Anything. I need you to write down exactly what my son said. Date it, time it, and sign it. Can you do that? She looked confused, but nodded. Yes, I can do that. May I ask why? Because I'm going to need it, I said. And Helena, Thank you for telling me the truth. Most people wouldn't have. She squeezed my hand again. I have a mother, she said simply. If someone treated her like that, I'd want her to know. After Helena left, I lay in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the house in Stamford. The house I'd bought for Ethan and his wife Sloane 3 years ago. The house they thought was theirs, but was actually, legally, entirely mine. I'd structured it that way intentionally, a protective measure, I'd told myself. A way to shield the asset from potential lawsuits or business failures. A way to help them while maintaining some control until Ethan proved he was mature enough to handle that kind of responsibility. Maturity. The word was almost funny now. I thought about the $200,000 I'd given them for the down payment, money I'd categorized in my mind as a loan but had never formalized in writing. I thought about the mortgage I'd paid off in full just 6 months ago, $650,000 wired from my account because I wanted to see them settled, secure, free from debt. I thought about how they'd thanked me, how Sloane had hugged me and called me the most generous mother-in-law in the world, how Ethan had actually looked me in the eye for once and said, "Thank you, Mom. This means everything." It had meant everything, just not in the way I'd thought. They weren't living in their house. They were living in my investment property, my asset, my generosity made concrete in the form of 4 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms in a nice neighborhood with good schools they'd probably never use because Sloane seemed far more interested in her Instagram following than in having children. And the beautiful thing, the absolutely perfect thing, was that they had no idea. A doctor came in around 6 p.m., a young woman who couldn't have been more than 35. She examined me, asked questions about my symptoms, shone lights in my eyes that made the pain in my head intensify to nauseating levels. "We're going to keep you here for at least a week," she said. "You have a severe concussion and a significant laceration that required 17 stitches. We need to monitor you for signs of brain bleeding. Do you have someone who can stay with you? You shouldn't be alone right now." "I'll be fine," I said. "Mrs. Ashford, I really think—" I said I'll be fine. She left looking concerned, probably making notes about the difficult patient in room 314. Let her. I had more important things to worry about than a doctor's opinion of my bedside manner. That night, alone in the dark hospital room with machines beeping around me and the IV drip keeping steady time, I didn't think about dying. I didn't think about the risk of brain bleeding or complications or any of the medical possibilities the doctor had outlined. Instead, I thought about consequences. Real consequences. The kind Ethan had never faced in his entire privileged life. I thought about how I'd always bailed him out. The credit card debt in college, $15,000 I'd paid off without making him work for it. The car accident his junior year when he'd been drinking. $35,000 in damages and legal fees that I'd handled with one phone call to my attorney. The job he'd lost 2 years after graduation because he couldn't be bothered to show up on time. I'd called in a favor to get him placed at another firm, never mind that he hadn't earned it. And then there was Sloane. Beautiful, manipulative Sloane with her Instagram-ready outfits and her strategic tears and her incredible talent for making Ethan feel like he had to choose between his wife and his mother. I'd watched it happen over the past 3 years. Watched her slowly isolate him, cutting off our weekly lunches first, then the phone calls, then even the occasional text message. 8 months ago, she'd put her foot down completely. I remembered that conversation. Ethan had called me, his voice strained. "Mom, Sloane and I think it's best if we have some space from family right now. She's been really stressed, and the pressure from you is it's too much." "What pressure?" I'd asked, genuinely confused. "I haven't asked you for anything." "That's not the point. It's just, she needs me to prioritize our marriage right now. I need to support her." Support her. As if Sloane needed support. As if she wasn't a perfectly healthy 29-year-old woman with no job, no responsibilities, and unlimited access to my son's bank account, which was really unlimited access to my regular influx of loans that kept their lifestyle afloat. I'd backed off, of course. What else could I do? I couldn't force my way into my son's life. I couldn't make him see what I saw. And some part of me, the part that remembered Richard's gentle voice telling me, "Viv, you need to let him make his own mistakes," thought maybe distance would help. Maybe Ethan would come to his senses. Maybe he'd realize that his mother wasn't the enemy. But he hadn't. And when I was lying on my kitchen floor bleeding, when I was being loaded into an ambulance, when a nurse called to tell him his mother might die, he'd chosen Sloane's comfort over my life. If my mother dies, send me the address of the cemetery. The words played on repeat in my mind. Each time I heard them, they became less painful and more clarifying. This was who my son was. Not who I'd hoped he'd become. Not who I'd tried to raise him to be. But who he actually was. A weak man who'd traded his integrity for an easy marriage to a woman who saw him as a meal ticket. Well, if that's what he wanted, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson about burning bridges with the person who held the match. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I planned. By the time the sun came up on Sunday morning and a new nurse came in to check my vitals, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Every step, every detail, every possible outcome. It was like being back in the boardroom again, preparing for a negotiation where failure wasn't an option. The nurse, a cheerful older woman named Patricia, tried to make small talk while she adjusted my IV. "Any family coming to visit today?" she asked brightly. "No," I said. "No family." She paused, picking up on something in my tone. "I'm sorry to hear that. Everyone needs support when they're going through something like this." "You're absolutely right," I said. "Everyone does need support. That's an important lesson I'm about to teach my son." She looked confused, but didn't push. Smart woman. Helena came back on shift Monday morning. When she saw me sitting up in bed, looking considerably better than I had on Saturday, relief flooded her face. "Mrs. Ashford, you look so much better. How are you feeling?" "Clear-headed," I said. "Helena, did you write down what my son said?" "I did." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her scrub's pocket. "I wasn't sure if you still wanted it, but I kept it just in case." I took the paper and unfolded it. Her handwriting was neat, precise. Saturday, November 3rd, 2024, 2:37 p.m. Called Ethan Ashford, son, to inform him of Mother Vivian Ashford's serious fall and head injury. Explained situation was potentially life-threatening. Response received. My wife doesn't want me to come. If my mother dies, send me the address of the cemetery. Helena Rodriguez, RN. This is perfect, I said. Thank you. Mrs. Ashford, can I ask what you're going to do? I looked at her. This woman who'd shown more compassion for me in 2 days than my own son had shown in 8 months. I'm going to teach him that actions have consequences, I said. Real consequences, the kind I should have taught him 20 years ago. She nodded slowly. Good, she said. That's good. He deserves it. Yes, I said. He does. Over the next 6 days, I made phone calls from my hospital bed. First to Martin Crawford, my attorney of 40 years, the man who'd handled every significant legal matter of my adult life. Vivian, his familiar voice came through the phone, warm with concern. I heard about your accident. How are you? I'm fine, Martin. I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to review all the legal documentation for the property in Stamford, the one I purchased for Ethan. There was a long silence. Vivian, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time my son learned about property law, I said. Specifically, about who actually owns the house he's been living in. Another pause. Are you sure about this? Once we go down this road? Martin, he told the hospital to send him my cemetery address. He couldn't be bothered to drive 20 minutes to see if his mother was dying. I'm not just sure. I'm certain. All right then, Martin said, and I could hear the shift in his voice, the transition from concerned friend to ruthless attorney. Let's discuss strategy. The week in the hospital gave me plenty of time to think about how I'd gotten here, How a woman who'd built an $8.5 million fortune from nothing had ended up alone on a hospital bed, rejected by the only child she'd spent 3 decades raising. The answer wasn't simple, but lying there with nothing to do but watch bad television and count ceiling tiles, I had no choice but to face it. I came to America from England when I was 24 years old with £3,000 in my pocket and a business degree from a university no one in Connecticut had ever heard of. That was 33 years ago, back when I still believed that hard work and determination were enough to overcome any obstacle. I was naive, but I was hungry. Hungry in a way that only immigrants understand, that specific desperation to prove you made the right choice, leaving everything behind. I got a job as an administrative assistant at a commercial real estate firm in Manhattan. The pay was terrible, $28,000 a year, but I watched everything. I learned how deals were structured, how properties were valued, how investors thought. I worked 70-hour weeks and saved every penny I could. By the time I was 27, I had enough for a down payment on my first property, a rundown office building in Bridgeport that everyone told me was a waste of money. I renovated it myself on weekends, hired contractors I could barely afford, and leased it to a small tech startup for triple what the previous owner had been getting, sold it 18 months later for a $160,000 profit. That was my seed money. That was the beginning. I met Richard at a real estate conference in Boston when I was 29. He was an architect, brilliant and kind, with these gentle blue eyes that seemed to see right through all my armor. We talked for 6 hours straight about building design and city planning, and our shared dream of creating spaces that actually meant something to people. 3 months later, he proposed. 6 months after that, we were married. Richard was my partner in every sense. He designed the buildings I bought and renovated. We worked together, built together, dreamed together. Our marriage wasn't perfect. We worked too much, traveled too often, sometimes went days speaking only about square footage and zoning laws. But it was real. It was solid. And when Ethan was born 2 years into our marriage, when I held that tiny baby in my arms and looked into Richard's eyes, I genuinely believed I could have it all. I was wrong. You can't build an empire and raise a child with the attention he deserved. I tried. God knows I tried. But there were only so many hours in the day, and when a deal needed closing or a property needed attention, the nanny was the one who tucked Ethan into bed. The nanny was the one who helped with homework. The nanny, a succession of them over the years, sweet women whose names I still remember with guilt, was the one who showed up to school plays when I was on a flight to Chicago or Baltimore or wherever the next opportunity was. Richard tried to warn me. I remember one conversation when Ethan was 7, maybe 8. We were in bed, late at night, and Richard said, "Viv, he needs you. Not your money, not the nice house, not the expensive toys. He needs you." "I know," I'd said. "I'm building this for him, so he never has to struggle the way I did." But what if he'd rather have his mother than a trust fund? I hadn't had an answer for that. So I'd kissed Richard and told him I'd try to cut back on travel, a promise I'd broken within 2 weeks. The truth was, I didn't know how to be the kind of mother who baked cookies and volunteered at school. I knew how to negotiate 6-figure deals. I knew how to spot undervalued properties and turn them into gold mines. I knew how to command a room full of investors who thought a woman had no business in commercial real estate. But sitting on the floor playing trucks with a 7-year-old, reading bedtime stories about talking animals, that felt foreign to me, uncomfortable, like wearing someone else's skin. So I did what I knew how to do. I provided. I made sure Ethan had the best of everything: private schools, summer camps, music lessons, sports equipment, college funds that grew larger every year. When he wanted to go to that expensive leadership retreat in Colorado, I wrote the check. When he crashed his car junior year, drunk, though we never talked about that directly, I paid for the damages and the lawyer and made sure it disappeared from his record. When he couldn't find a job after graduation and spent 6 months finding himself in Thailand, I funded it without complaint. Every time, I told myself I was being a good mother. I was supporting him, helping him, making his life easier than mine had been. It never occurred to me that I was teaching him the wrong lesson. that I was showing him that money could solve any problem, that consequences were something other people faced, that his mother's love came with a price tag attached. Richard saw it. Before he died 4 years ago, a massive heart attack at 63, gone before the ambulance even arrived, he tried to talk to me about it. We were having dinner, just the two of us, at the Italian place we'd gone to for 20 years. Ethan was 28 then, already dating Sloane, though we hadn't met her yet. "You need to stop bailing him out," Richard said, setting down his wine glass with unusual firmness. "Every time you solve his problems for him, you rob him of the chance to grow." "I'm helping him," I'd protested. "No, you're crippling him. And the worst part is, you're teaching him that your love is transactional. That it comes in the form of checks and bailouts, not actual presents." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Richard's eyes were sad, not angry. "When was the last time you had a real conversation with him? About his life, his dreams, his fears? Not about money or what you can do for him, but about who he actually is." I'd opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. I had no idea who Ethan was. Not really. I knew his birthday, his social security number, his bank account balance. But his hopes? His genuine personality beneath the polite distance he'd maintained since adolescence? I had no clue. "After I'm gone," Richard had said quietly, "you're going to regret this. You're going to want that connection, and it might be too late." "Don't talk like that," I'd said, reaching for his hand. "You're not going anywhere." But he was. 3 months later, he collapsed in his home office. I found him when I came back from a site visit. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was already gone. The grief nearly destroyed me. Richard had been my anchor, my partner, the only person who truly knew me. Without him, the house felt enormous and empty. The business felt pointless. Money meant nothing when there was no one to share it with, no one to celebrate victories with, no one to hold me when the loneliness became unbearable. So I turned to Ethan, my son, my only remaining family. I called him more, invited him to lunch, tried to bridge the gap that years of absence had created. But I didn't know how to do it without money. I offered to help with his rent. I bought him a new car when his old one needed repairs. I sent checks for birthdays and holidays that were far too generous, desperate to show him I cared the only way I knew how. And when he met Sloane, when he brought her to meet me for the first time at that overpriced French restaurant in Greenwich, I was so grateful for the possibility of family that I overlooked all the warning signs. Sloane was beautiful, I'd give her that. Dark hair, pretty face, the kind of polished look that came from careful attention and expensive products. She was charming too at first, laughed at my stories, asked interested questions about my business, complimented my jewelry. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at the restaurant, at my watch, at the car I drove. A calculation, an assessment. "Your son tells me you're quite successful," she'd said over appetizers, her smile bright and empty. "I've done well," I'd replied modestly. "She's being humble," Ethan had interjected, and I'd noticed how his hand found hers immediately, how he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Mom built her company from nothing. She owns properties all over Connecticut and New York. The way Sloane's eyes had lit up at that should have told me everything I needed to know, but I was lonely and desperate and so pathetically grateful that my son seemed happy that I ignored it. 6 months later, they were engaged. A year after that, married. I paid for the wedding, of course. $40,000 for a reception at a country club with flowers flown in from Ecuador and a dress that cost more than my first car. Sloane cried when I gave them the check and called me the most generous person she'd ever met. I remembered feeling proud, feeling like maybe I'd finally gotten it right, finally found a way to show love that was received and appreciated. Then came the house. They'd been renting a tiny apartment in Norwalk, and Sloane had mentioned, casually over brunch, how much she dreamed of having a real home. Somewhere we could put down roots, maybe start a family someday. She'd looked at Ethan with those big doe eyes, and he'd squeezed her hand and looked at me hopefully. I'd found the property in Stamford within a week. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, good neighborhood, excellent school district. Listed at $850,000. I'd negotiated it down to $800 and paid for it through my LLC, structuring it carefully to protect the asset while still giving them the feeling of ownership. Paid cash, $650,000 after putting $200,000 down that I'd described to them as helping with the down payment. They'd thought they had a mortgage. They'd thought they were building equity. They'd thought it was their house. And I'd let them think that because I was still trying to buy the love and gratitude I'd failed to earn through actual presence and connection. The last real conversation I'd had with Ethan was 8 months ago. He'd called me on a Tuesday afternoon, his voice strained. "Mom, Sloan and I need some space." "Space from what?" I'd asked, confused. "From you, from the constant involvement. She says it's suffocating, having you always there, always offering help we didn't ask for." "I'm just trying to—" "I know what you're trying to do, but it's too much. We need to focus on our marriage right now, without outside pressure." Outside pressure. That's what I'd become to my own son. Not family, not support, pressure. "How long?" I'd asked, my voice careful and controlled, even though I felt like I was crumbling inside. "I don't know. Until Sloan feels more comfortable, until things settle down." Things never settled down. 8 months of minimal contact, brief texts on holidays, no phone calls, no visits, until that Saturday when I'd fallen and the hospital called and he'd told them to send him my cemetery address. Lying in that hospital bed, finally seeing it all clearly, I understood that Richard had been right. I'd built everything wrong. I'd thought I was showing love through generosity when really I was just creating dependence and resentment. I'd thought I was being a good mother by making life easy when really I was preventing my son from ever learning to stand on his own. But here was the thing Richard hadn't lived to see. It wasn't too late to teach the lesson. It was just going to be a much harder, much more expensive lesson than it would have been 20 years ago. And sometimes, the hardest lessons are the most important ones. I was discharged from Greenwich Hospital on the 7th day, a Thursday afternoon that felt almost mockingly beautiful. The sky was that perfect autumn blue that Connecticut does so well, and the air had that crisp quality that usually made me feel alive and energized. The doctor, a different one this time, an older man with kind eyes and graying hair, went through the discharge instructions with careful attention. "You're healing remarkably well, Mrs. Ashford," he said, reviewing my chart. "The stitches can come out in another week, but I want you to take it easy. No strenuous activity, no driving for at least another few days, and if you experience any dizziness, any nausea, any vision changes at all, you come back immediately. Understood?" "Understood," I said, signing the discharge papers. "Is someone picking you up? You really shouldn't be alone for the next few days." "My housekeeper is meeting me at home," I lied smoothly. "She'll be staying with me for the week." He looked skeptical, but didn't push. I'd been a difficult enough patient that I suspected he was simply relieved to see me go. Helena walked me out to the taxi I'd called, carrying the small bag of personal items I'd accumulated during my stay. At the entrance, she stopped and turned to me. "Mrs. Ashford, I know this isn't my place, but are you going to be okay? Really okay?" I looked at this woman who'd shown me more compassion in a week than my own son had shown in months. "Helena, I'm going to be more than okay. I'm going to be free." She hugged me then, quick and fierce. "Good luck," she whispered. "And if you ever need anything at all, you have my number." The taxi ride back to Greenwich felt longer than usual. I watched the familiar streets pass by, the downtown area with its expensive boutiques and restaurants, the residential neighborhoods with their manicured lawns and historic homes, the country clubs where I'd attended countless charity events and fundraisers over the years. This was my world, the life I'd built. And yet, I'd never felt more alone in it. When I walked into my house, the silence was absolute. My housekeeper, Maria, had been in while I was hospitalized. Everything was immaculate, the floors gleaming, the windows spotless, fresh flowers in the vase on the entryway table. But it was empty. Just me and 6,000 square feet of perfect, pristine emptiness. I went directly to my home office, ignoring the doctor's instructions about rest. Rest could wait. I had work to do. The file Martin had prepared was waiting on my desk, delivered by courier as I'd requested. I opened it and spread the contents across my mahogany desk, the desk Richard had given me for our 10th anniversary, custom made to my exact specifications. Every document was there. The original purchase agreement for the Stamford property, showing my LLC as the buyer. The deed, with my name alone on the title. The loan documentation for the $200,000 down payment that had never been formalized, never been signed, existing only as a transfer note in my personal records. Bank statements showing the full mortgage payoff of $650,000 from my account 6 months ago. It was all there. Irrefutable proof that the house Ethan and Sloane thought was theirs belonged entirely to me. I called Martin on his direct line. He picked up on the second ring. "Vivienne, you're home. How are you feeling?" "Clear-headed," I said. "Did you review everything?" "I did. And Vivienne, I need to ask you one more time. Are you absolutely certain about this? Once we file these documents, once we initiate eviction proceedings, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son is already over," I finished. He made that clear when he told the hospital to send him my cemetery address. "I'm not ending anything, Martin. I'm just acknowledging what already exists." A long pause, then, "All right, how do you want to proceed?" "I want to file for eviction based on non-payment of the loan for the down payment and non-payment of rent for the property." "How long will it take?" "In Connecticut, with proper documentation, we can have them out in 60 days. Maybe sooner if they don't contest it, though I suspect they will once they understand what's happening." "Good. File the paperwork. But Martin, there's one more thing I want." "What's that?" "I want to tell them in person. I want them to hear it from me, in a setting where they can't run away, can't hang up, can't hide behind Sloane's manipulation. Can you arrange a meeting at your office? Make it sound routine, like we're discussing estate planning or family financial matters. Don't give them any warning about what's really coming." Martin was quiet for a moment. That's actually brilliant. And cruel." "No," I said. "What's cruel is leaving your mother bleeding in a hospital. This is just consequences." "When do you want to do this?" "Next week. Give me time to heal a bit more, to make sure I can sit through the meeting without looking weak. And Martin? I want a judge present. Can you get Marcus Whitmore?" "Judge Whitmore?" "Vivienne. He's a sitting family court judge. He can't just... He's also an old friend who's seen enough family exploitation to have opinions about it. And this is technically a family legal matter. Call him. Tell him the situation. I think he'll want to be there." Another pause. "You've really thought this through?" "I've had nothing but time to think," I said. "Make it happen, Martin." Over the next 3 days, I did something I hadn't done in years. I investigated my own son, not out of paranoia or suspicion, but out of necessity. If I was going to do this, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I needed to understand the full scope of his financial situation, his marriage, his life. It didn't take long to find the cracks. Ethan's LinkedIn profile showed he was still at the same consulting firm he'd been at for 5 years. Same position he'd started in. No promotions, no advancement. According to industry standards I could easily research, his salary was probably somewhere around $90,000 to $95,000. Not bad for most people, but nowhere near enough to support the lifestyle he and Sloane were living. I logged into the bank account I'd set up for him when he was 18, an account he probably didn't realize I still had access to. The statements told a story of consistent overspending. Regular transfers from savings to checking to cover shortfalls. credit card payments that were always the minimum amount. And twice in the past year, deposits of $5,000 each that I recognized as loans I'd given him when he'd called with vague stories about unexpected expenses. Then I did what I should have done years ago. I hired a private investigator. Not for anything dramatic or television-worthy, just a basic financial background check on Sloan Pemberton Ashford. What came back was enlightening. Sloan had grown up in Youngstown, Ohio. Father was a factory worker who'd lost his job when she was 14. Mother was a part-time cashier. They'd struggled financially throughout her adolescence. Foreclosure notices, utility shutoffs, the kind of instability that left scars. Sloan had worked her way through community college, got a degree in communications, and moved to Connecticut 5 years ago with dreams of becoming an influencer or content creator. Those dreams hadn't panned out. Her Instagram following was modest. About 8,000 followers, most of them probably purchased based on the engagement rates. She'd done some sponsored posts for small brands, probably making a few $100s here and there. Certainly nothing approaching a real income. But the most interesting finding was the debt. Sloan had $47,000 in credit card debt spread across 5 different cards that Ethan apparently knew nothing about. The investigator had found the statements in a credit report. She'd been making minimum payments, barely keeping her head above water, probably counting on my eventual death and Ethan's inheritance to solve the problem. The audacity of it was almost impressive. I printed everything out, added it to Martin's file, and waited. On Tuesday evening, 5 days after my discharge, my phone buzzed with a text message from Ethan. The first communication I'd received from him since that brief exchange setting up the meeting. Heard you got out of the hospital. Glad you're okay. 9 words. Not, I'm sorry. Not, can I come see you? Not even, how are you feeling? Just a perfunctory acknowledgement that I'd survived. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, that still remembered holding him as a baby, that still wanted to believe the best of him, wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to give him one more chance to be the son I'd always hoped he'd be. But the stronger part of me, the part that had built a business empire through rational decision-making and refusal to indulge in wishful thinking, knew better. I typed back, "Thank you. See you Thursday at 10 a.m. at Martin's office. We have important matters to discuss regarding the house." His response came immediately. "Okay, Sloan and I will be there." Of course Sloan would be there. She wouldn't miss an opportunity to be part of a discussion about property and money. I imagined her already planning her outfit, rehearsing her sweet daughter-in-law routine, preparing whatever manipulation she'd use to try to get more money out of me. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Thursday morning arrived with the same mocking, beautiful weather. I dressed carefully. A charcoal gray Armani suit, cream silk blouse, my Cartier watch, pearl earrings Richard had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a successful businesswoman who'd built an empire and wasn't about to be taken advantage of by anyone, family or otherwise. Martin's office was in downtown Greenwich, a corner suite in a historic building that screamed old money and established power. I arrived at 9:45, early as always. Martin was waiting in his personal office, and he wasn't alone. Judge Marcus Whitmore stood by the window, looking every bit the authority figure he was. 62 years old, silver hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. We'd known each other for 15 years through various charity events and social functions. He'd presided over countless family law cases, seen every variation of greed and manipulation families could inflict on each other. "Vivian," he said, coming forward to shake my hand. His grip was firm, his gaze assessing. Martin filled me in on the situation. I have to say, this is one of the more clear-cut cases of family exploitation I've seen. "Thank you for coming, Marcus. I know this is unusual." Unusual, but not unprecedented. And frankly, after 40 years on the bench, I welcome the opportunity to see justice done in real time instead of cleaning up the mess years later. He gestured to the conference table where Martin had laid out all the documentation. I've reviewed everything. Your legal position is absolutely solid. They have no claim to that property whatsoever. Good, I said, sitting down. My head was throbbing. The doctor had been right about taking it easy, but I ignored it. Because I want this to be clean. No ambiguity, no room for them to claim I'm being vindictive or unfair. Oh, they'll claim that anyway, Marcus said with a slight smile. They always do. But the law is the law, and the law is entirely on your side. At exactly 10:03, because of course they couldn't even be on time, the receptionist buzzed to announce their arrival. Martin went out to greet them and escort them to the conference room. I heard them before I saw them. Sloane's voice, bright and cheerful. What a beautiful office. Is that original crown molding? Then they walked in, and I watched their expressions change in real time. Ethan saw me first. His eyes widened slightly, probably shocked by the healing bruise still visible on my temple, the careful way I was sitting, the reality of the injury he'd dismissed so easily. But he recovered quickly, pasting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mom, you look good. I look like someone who recently suffered a traumatic head injury, I said evenly. But thank you. Sloane was wearing a Reformation dress I recognized from her Instagram. $300 retail, probably charged to one of those secret credit cards. Her smile was wide and looked almost genuine as she came forward to kiss my cheek. Vivian, we've been so worried about you. I told Ethan we should have visited, but you know how hospitals are with their visiting hour restrictions, and we didn't want to intrude while you were recovering. There are no visiting hour restrictions for family, I interrupted quietly. Family can visit any time. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw it. Then they noticed Judge Whitmore. Ethan's face went pale. What's going on here? Why is there a judge? Please sit down, Martin said, his voice professional and cool. We have legal matters to discuss. They sat, Sloane's hand immediately finding Ethan's, her eyes darting between all of us with growing unease. Good. Let her be nervous. Let her feel a fraction of the fear I'd felt lying on that hospital floor. Martin opened the file and began laying out documents with precise, deliberate movements. Purchase agreements, title deeds, bank transfer records, each piece of paper another nail in the coffin of their assumptions. Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, Martin began. We're here today to formalize certain legal matters regarding the property located at 847 Sycamore Drive in Stamford, Connecticut, the property you've been residing in for the past 3 years. Our house, Sloane said quickly. What about it? It's not your house, I said, my voice calm and clear. It's my house. It has always been my house. You've been living there by my generosity, which I am now formally revoking. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. Sloane's mouth opened and closed without sound. I don't understand, Ethan finally managed. We have a mortgage. We've been making payments. No, Martin interrupted, sliding the title deed across the table. You don't have a mortgage. Your mother paid cash for the property through her LLC. The entire purchase price of $800,000 was paid in full at closing. You have never made a mortgage payment because there is no mortgage. Ethan picked up the deed with shaking hands. I watched the color drain from his face as he read it. But the down payment, you said you'd loan us money for the down payment. I gave you $200,000, I said. Money you've never paid back. Money that was described as a loan, but never formalized because I trusted you. My mistake. Sloane was crying now, those strategic tears she did so well. Vivian, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? What did we do wrong? I looked at her for a long moment. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the piece of paper Helena had given me. I unfolded it carefully and read aloud. Saturday, November 3rd, 2:37 p.m. Called Ethan Ashford to inform him of Mother Vivian Ashford's serious fall and head injury. Explained situation was potentially life-threatening. Response received. My wife doesn't want me to come. If my mother dies, send me the address of the cemetery. I set the paper down on the table between us. That's what you did wrong. Ethan's face went from pale to red. I was in shock. I didn't mean... You didn't mean what? I asked, my voice still deadly calm. You didn't mean to tell the hospital to send you my cemetery address? You didn't mean to choose your wife's comfort over your mother's life? You didn't mean to spend 8 months avoiding me because it was easier than standing up to her? This is ridiculous, Sloane said, her tears evaporating as anger took over. So he made one comment in a moment of stress and you're going to punish us by taking our home? I'm not taking your home, I said. I'm reclaiming my property. There's a difference. Judge Whitmore spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of decades of authority. Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, let me make this very clear. Your mother has absolute legal right to this property. She purchased it. She owns it. She has allowed you to live there rent-free for 3 years. She is now exercising her legal right to evict you. You have 60 days to vacate the premises. 60 days? Sloane's voice rose to a near shriek. We can't find a new place in 60 days. We don't have money for... She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd almost said. But I finished the sentence for her. You don't have money for a down payment on a new place. You don't have money for first and last month's rent. Because you've been living beyond your means, counting on my generosity, and eventually my death, to fund a lifestyle you can't actually afford. I slid another piece of paper across the table. The credit report. $47,000 in credit card debt, Sloane. 5 different cards. Did Ethan know about those? Ethan grabbed the paper, his hands shaking. I watched his face as he read it, watched the realization dawn, watched the betrayal sink in. Sloane, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What is this? I can explain. You told me we were fine financially. You said we just needed to be careful for a few months. We would have been fine. Sloane turned to face him, desperation clear in her eyes. If your mother hadn't... If she'd just... We were supposed to inherit. We were supposed to... Inherit what? Ethan's voice was getting louder. She's 57 years old. She could live another 30 years. What were you planning to do, wait for her to die? The look on Sloane's face answered that question better than words ever could. Judge Whitmore leaned forward, his expression one of profound disgust. Mr. Ashford, I've been a family court judge for 40 years. I've seen every variation of greed, manipulation, and exploitation that families can inflict on each other. But I have to say, this is one of the few times I've seen someone actually deserve what's happening to them. He turned to me. Mrs. Ashford, you built a fortune from nothing. You paid for your son's entire life. You gave him every advantage. And when you were at your most vulnerable, when you could have died, he chose his wife's comfort over your life. You are absolutely within your rights, both legal and moral, to do this. Then he looked back at Ethan, and his voice became cold. Your son. He doesn't imagine what you've just done with his house, but he's about to find out, and frankly, it's about time someone taught him that actions have consequences. I signed the eviction documents. My hand was steady. I felt no guilt, no hesitation, no maternal instinct to save him one more time. Ethan tried one last time. Mom, please, I know I made a mistake. I know I should have come to the hospital, but you're destroying us. How are we supposed to start over with nothing? I looked at my son, really looked at him. At 32 years old, he looked exactly like what he was. A boy who'd never grown up, who'd never faced real consequences, who'd been protected and coddled and bailed out so many times that he'd never developed the strength to stand on his own. Ethan, I said quietly, I'm not destroying you. I'm giving you the opportunity I should have given you 20 years ago. The chance to build something yourself. To learn what it means to work for what you have. To understand that money isn't magic, it's earned. I stood up, gathering my things. You have 60 days. I suggest you use them wisely. I walked out of Martin's office and didn't look back. The 48 hours after that meeting were silent. Complete radio silence from Ethan and Sloan. No calls, no texts, no desperate pleas or angry accusations. Nothing. I knew from Martin that they'd hired a lawyer, some young associate from a mid-tier firm in Stamford who'd probably taken one look at the documentation and told them they had no case. But they were going to try anyway. People always did when they were desperate. I spent those 2 days preparing for what I knew was coming. Not a legal battle. Martin had assured me that was unwinnable for them. But the emotional warfare, the attempts at manipulation, the family and friends who would inevitably be recruited to convince me I was being cruel, heartless, vindictive. I wasn't prepared for who would actually reach out first. Saturday morning, my doorbell rang at 8 a.m. I answered it to find a woman I barely recognized standing on my doorstep. It took me a moment to place her, Michelle, Sloane's mother. I'd met her once, briefly, at the wedding. She'd been quiet then, almost invisible next to her louder, more gregarious husband. She wasn't quiet now. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "May I come in? I need to talk to you about what you're doing to my daughter." I considered closing the door in her face, but curiosity won out. I stepped aside and let her enter. She didn't wait for me to offer her a seat. She stood in my foyer, her purse clutched in front of her like a shield, and launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "I know you think Sloane is some kind of gold digger. I know that's the story you're telling yourself to justify this cruelty. But you don't know her. You don't know what she's been through." "Enlighten me," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Michelle's eyes filled with tears. "My husband lost his job when Sloane was 14. We went from middle class to nothing almost overnight. We lost our house. We had to move in with my sister. Sloane watched me work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. She watched her father sink into depression so deep he could barely get out of bed. She watched everything we'd built just disappear." "That must have been difficult," I said, and I meant it. I understood financial instability. I'd lived it myself. "It was hell," Michelle said. And Sloane swore she'd never let that happen to her. She swore she'd build a life that was secure, stable, safe. When she met Ethan, when she saw the life you'd built, the security you could provide, yes, she saw it as safety. Is that so wrong? "No," I said. "What's wrong is building that safety on someone else's foundation while contributing nothing yourself. What's wrong is manipulating my son into cutting me out of his life. What's wrong is accumulating $47,000 in secret debt while living in a house I paid for. And what's wrong, what's absolutely unforgivable, is standing by while your son-in-law tells a hospital to send him his mother's cemetery address." Michelle flinched. She didn't know he said that. She had no idea. "She created the environment where he felt comfortable saying it," I interrupted. "She spent 3 years systematically isolating him from me, making me the enemy, the obstacle, the problem to be managed. And when I was lying in a hospital bed, potentially dying, your daughter got exactly what she wanted. A husband who chose her comfort over basic human decency." "You're taking everything from her," Michelle whispered. "The house, the security, the life she built." "She didn't build anything," I said, my voice hard now. "I built it. With my money, my work, my decades of sacrifice. Sloane just moved into what I created and acted like she owned it. Well, now she knows the truth. It was never hers. It was always mine." Michelle looked at me with something like hatred. "You're a cruel woman, Vivian Ashford. You've wrapped your cruelty in logic and legality, but that doesn't change what it is. You're destroying 2 young people's lives because your feelings got hurt." "No," I said quietly. "I'm teaching 2 people who've never faced real consequences what it means to be adults. And if you'd done that for Sloane 20 years ago, maybe she wouldn't be in this situation now." Michelle left without another word. I watched through the window as she got into her car, an old Honda that had seen better days, and drove away. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. She was a mother trying to protect her daughter. I understood that. But understanding didn't change the facts. That evening my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Ashford?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "This is David Chen. I'm the attorney representing Ethan and Sloane Ashford." "Mr. Chen, what can I do for you?" "I'm calling to see if we can reach some kind of settlement here. My clients are willing to acknowledge the debt for the down payment. They can work out a payment plan." "How much can they pay per month?" I interrupted. A pause. "They could probably manage $1,500. $1,500 per month on a $200,000 debt. At that rate, it would take them over 11 years to pay it back, and that's without interest. And we both know they won't last 11 months, let alone 11 years. Mrs. Ashford, they're trying to do the right thing. The right thing would have been coming to the hospital when his mother was potentially dying," I said. "The right thing would have been honesty about their financial situation instead of secret credit cards and assumed inheritances. The right thing would have been treating me like family instead of an ATM with an inconvenient pulse." "So there's no room for negotiation?" "They have 60 days to vacate my property," I said. "That's not negotiable. What they do with those 60 days is up to them." I hung up before he could respond. The phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was Ethan. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment before answering. "Mom." His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "Please, we need to talk." "We already talked, Ethan, in Martin's office, with a judge present." "That wasn't talking. That was you ambushing us with the truth," I said. "With legal documentation showing exactly what you've been living in for 3 years. That's not an ambush, that's reality." "Fine. Yes, I should have come to the hospital. I know that. I was wrong. But Mom, this is too much. You're taking everything from us because I made one mistake." "One mistake?" I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "Ethan, you've been making the same mistake for 32 years, taking without giving, receiving without reciprocating, living off my generosity while treating me like an obligation. The hospital was just the moment when you finally said out loud what you've been showing me through your actions for years." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said, and I realized it was true. "I don't want anything from you anymore. That's the point. I spent 3 decades trying to buy your love, your respect, your time. I'm done. You're 32 years old. You have a college degree I paid for, skills you should have developed, and 60 days to figure out how to live within your actual means. That's more than I had when I came to this country." "We're not you," he said, and there was bitterness in his voice now. "We didn't grow up poor and hungry. We don't have whatever drove you to build all of this." "No," I agreed. "You had everything handed to you. And that's my fault. I thought I was giving you advantages. I was actually crippling you. But it's not too late for you to learn. You just have to be willing to do it the hard way. And if we can't? If we fail?" I thought about that question. Thought about the mother I'd been, the mother I'd tried to be, the mother I should have been. "Then you'll learn from failing," I said. "Your father tried to tell me years ago that the greatest gift a parent can give a child is the opportunity to fail and figure out how to get back up. I didn't listen. I kept catching you before you could fall. But I can't do that anymore, Ethan. I won't." "So that's it? You're just done with me?" The pain in his voice was real. For a moment, just a moment, I wavered. But then I remembered lying on that hospital floor, remembered the taste of blood and the cold marble and the fear, remembered the nurse's voice telling me my son had said to send him my cemetery address, remembered the absolute certainty that I was completely, utterly alone. "I'm not done with you," I said quietly. But the version of our relationship where you take and I give, where you hurt me and I forgive, where you disrespect me and I make excuses, that's done. If you want a relationship with me after this, you'll have to earn it. The same way you'll have to earn everything else from now on. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My head was pounding. But I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange blur of activity and silence. Activity on my end. Working with Martin to finalize the eviction proceedings, consulting with real estate agents about listing the Stamford property, reorganizing my estate planning to reflect my new reality. Silence from Ethan and Sloane, at least directly. But I heard things. Greenwich was a small town in all the ways that mattered, and people talked. I heard from my hairdresser that Sloane had been spotted at a coffee shop in tears, telling anyone who would listen about her cruel mother-in-law who was making them homeless. I heard from a colleague at the country club that Ethan had been asking around about job opportunities, suddenly desperate to increase his income. I heard from Maria, my housekeeper, that her cousin who worked at a moving company had been hired to give them a quote and had reported that the house was in chaos, boxes everywhere, Ethan and Sloane fighting constantly. Good. Let them feel chaos. Let them feel desperate. Let them feel what it's like when the safety net disappears. But I also heard something else, something that made my carefully constructed armor crack just slightly. I heard from Helena, who called me 3 weeks after the meeting at Martin's office. "Mrs. Ashford, I hope I'm not overstepping by calling." "Not at all, Helena. How are you?" "I'm fine. But I wanted you to know, your son came to the hospital yesterday." My heart skipped. "Why? Is he hurt?" No. He came looking for me. He wanted to know if I still had my notes from the day I called him about your fall. He wanted to know if I'd really written down exactly what he said." I sat down slowly. "What did you tell him?" I told him yes, that I documented everything because it was so shocking that I knew it needed to be on record. And Mrs. Ashford. He cried. Right there in the hallway, he just broke down crying. He said he didn't remember saying it, that he was in shock, that he couldn't believe those words had come out of his mouth. "Do you believe him?" Helena was quiet for a moment. "I believe he regrets saying it. I'm not sure that's the same as him not meaning it at the time." "No," I said. "It's not. He asked me to call you, to tell you how sorry he is. I told him he needed to tell you himself, but he said you won't take his calls." "I won't," I confirmed. "Did he say anything else?" "He said," Helena hesitated. "He said that he's starting to understand what you were trying to teach him, that he's been looking at apartments he can actually afford and they're terrible. That he's been trying to figure out how to live on just his salary and it's not possible, not the way they've been living. He said he never realized how much of their life was funded by you. 32 years old, and he's just figuring that out now." "Better late than never," Helena offered gently. "Maybe," I said. "Thank you for calling, Helena. I appreciate you telling me. Mrs. Ashford, one more thing. He asked me if I thought you'd ever forgive him." "What did you say?" "I said that forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust has to be rebuilt through actions, not words. I hope that was okay." "That was perfect," I said, my throat tight. "Thank you." After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the photo on my desk. It was from Ethan's high school graduation, him in his cap and gown, me on one side, Richard on the other. We were all smiling. Ethan looked so young, so full of potential. I looked proud. Richard looked like he always did, kind, present, solid. I wondered what Richard would think of what I was doing. Would he approve? Would he think I was being too harsh? Or would he recognize this as the lesson he'd been trying to get me to teach for years? I'd never know. But somehow, sitting there looking at that picture, I felt like he understood. The 45th day after the eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, Martin called me that morning with an update. "They've found a place," he said. A 2-bedroom apartment in Norwalk. Month-to-month lease, first and last month's rent. Sloane's mother co-signed because their credit is apparently too damaged to qualify on their own. Good, I said. They're actually leaving then? According to their attorney, yes. They'll be out by the 60th day as required. And the house? I have 3 potential buyers already. The market in Stamford is strong. You should clear at least $850, maybe more. $850,000. Nearly $50,000 in profit from a property I'd bought 3 years ago. Under any other circumstances, I would have felt satisfied with that return on investment. Instead, I felt hollow. List it, I said. I don't want to hold on to it any longer than necessary. That afternoon, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. My doorbell rang, and when I opened it, Sloane was standing there alone. No Ethan, no tears, no manipulation. Just Sloane, looking smaller somehow, wearing jeans and a plain sweater I'd never seen before. "Vivienne," she said quietly, "can we talk? Just the 2 of us?" Every instinct told me to say no, to close the door, maintain my boundaries, refuse to engage. But something in her face stopped me. She looked defeated, and strangely, more real than I'd ever seen her. I let her in. We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd hosted their engagement party 3 years ago, where Sloane had laughed and posed for photos and thanked me effusively for my incredible generosity. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I'm not here to beg," she said, which surprised me. "I know that won't work. I'm here to apologize. Really apologize, not the fake kind I'm good at." I waited. "Everything you said about me was true," she continued, her voice steady. "I did see Ethan as security. I did manipulate him into cutting you off. I did accumulate all that debt thinking your money would eventually solve everything. And I did stand by when he said that horrible thing to the nurse because part of me thought, if you died, all our problems would be solved." The honesty was startling and horrible, but I appreciated it more than any amount of tears or excuses. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because my mother came to see you. And when she came back, she told me what you said about how she should have taught me consequences 20 years ago. And she was right. You're right. I've spent my whole adult life trying to avoid ending up like my parents, broke and desperate and helpless. But I did it by becoming something worse. A parasite. Someone who takes and never builds anything real." She looked down at her hands. "Ethan and I have been looking at apartments. Real apartments, the kind we can actually afford on his salary. They're terrible, Vivienne. Tiny and old and nothing like the house. And I kept getting angry, thinking about how unfair it was, how you were punishing us so cruelly. And now? Now I'm looking at my mother's apartment, the one she's lived in for 15 years, working 2 jobs to afford. It's smaller than the ones Ethan and I were rejecting as not good enough, and she's happy there. She has friends, she has a life, she has dignity. And I realize that I've never had any of those things, not really, because I built my whole existence on your money and Ethan's weakness." I didn't know what to say to that. Sloane stood up. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to stop the eviction or give us more time or help us financially. I'm just asking you to know that you were right about all of it. And that maybe destroying our comfortable lie was the kindest thing anyone's ever done for us, even if it doesn't feel kind right now." She walked to the door, then turned back. "One more thing. I filed for divorce yesterday." That shocked me into speech. "What?" "I married Ethan for the wrong reasons. Security, money, the life I thought he could give me, which was really the life you were giving him. Now that that's gone, there's nothing left but the truth. I don't love him. I probably never did, and he deserves better than that, even if he doesn't deserve much. Sloane, I'm going to move back to Ohio. Live with my mom for a while, figure out who I actually am when I'm not playing a role, get a real job, pay off my debt myself, be an actual adult for the first time in my life. She smiled, and it was sad but genuine. Thank you for destroying my fantasy, Vivian. I hated you for it. I probably still do, a little. But I also know you saved me from spending the next 30 years becoming more and more hollow. She left before I could respond. I sat in that living room for over an hour, processing what had just happened. Of all the outcomes I'd imagined, Sloane's honest self-awareness hadn't been one of them. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as another manipulation, another act, but it hadn't felt like an act. It had felt like someone finally looking in a mirror and hating what they saw enough to change. That evening, my phone rang. Ethan. Again. I'd ignored his calls for weeks, let them go to voicemail, deleted the messages without listening. This time I answered. Mom. He sounded exhausted. Sloane just told me she came to see you. She told me what she said. Is it true? Is she really filing for divorce? That's what she told me. A long silence. Then, I don't know what to do. What do you mean? I mean, everything's falling apart. The house, the marriage, the life I thought I had. I look around at what's left, and I don't recognize any of it. I don't recognize myself. Good, I said. Good? Ethan, you've spent your entire adult life living someone else's dream with someone else's money. You've never had to figure out who you actually are or what you actually want. Maybe this is your chance. My chance? His voice rose. Mom, I'm about to be divorced and living in a terrible apartment and barely scraping by. That's not a chance. That's a disaster. It's only a disaster if you don't learn from it, I said. Your father tried to tell me years ago that the best gift I could give you was the opportunity to fall and figure out how to get back up. I didn't listen. I kept catching you. But I'm not catching you anymore. So you're really just going to let me crash? I'm going to let you land, I corrected. And then I'm going to see what you do next. Whether you lie there and blame everyone else, or whether you stand up and start building something real. Another silence. Then, quietly, I'm sorry for what I said to the nurse. I've been trying to tell you that for weeks, but you wouldn't answer. I'm so sorry, Mom. The words I'd been waiting for, the apology I'd needed, and yet hearing them I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not forgiveness, not even anger. Just a kind of neutral acknowledgement. I believe you're sorry, I said. I believe you regret saying it. But Ethan, I don't know if you're sorry because you understand why it was wrong, or just because it had consequences for you. What's the difference? Everything, I said. One is real growth. The other is just regret that you got caught. How do I prove which one it is? You don't prove it to me, I said. You prove it to yourself, by how you live the next year, the next 5 years, the next decade, by whether you take this disaster and build something real from it, or whether you just find someone else to bail you out and make the same mistakes all over again. And if I do it right? If I actually learn and grow and become someone you could be proud of? I thought about that question, thought about what I wanted, what I needed, what was even possible anymore. Then maybe, I said carefully, we could start over, not go back to what we had. That's gone. But build something new, something based on mutual respect instead of transactions, something real. I'd like that, he said, his voice breaking. I'd really like that, Mom. Then earn it, I said. Not with apologies or promises, with actions, with time, with proof that you've actually changed. How long? I don't know, I said honestly. As long as it takes for me to believe it's real. After we hung up, I went to my desk and pulled out the letter Richard had left for me. The one I was supposed to give to Ethan when he became a father. I opened it and read it again, Richard's familiar handwriting blurring as my eyes filled with tears. Viv, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry I won't be there to see our son grow up completely. But I trust you to teach him what he needs to know. The most important lesson is this. Love isn't what you give someone. It's what you allow them to earn. You've spent so much time trying to give him everything that you forgot to let him work for anything. It's not too late to change that. Let him fall, Viv. Let him struggle. Let him learn that the sweetest victories are the ones you earn yourself. And when he finally stands on his own 2 feet, when he's built something real with his own hands and his own determination, that's when you'll have the son we both dreamed of raising. Until then, be strong. Be firm. Be the mother he needs, not the mother who's easier to be. I love you, always. R. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in my desk. Someday, maybe, I'd give it to Ethan, when he was ready to understand it. The 60th day arrived. Martin called to confirm that Ethan and Sloane had vacated the property, that the keys had been turned over, that the house was officially empty and ready to be listed. "How do you feel?" Martin asked. I thought about that question. How did I feel? Not happy, exactly. Not satisfied in the way I'd imagined I would be, but not guilty either. Not regretful. Not weak. "I feel clear," I said finally, like I can finally see everything without the fog of false hope and wishful thinking. "That's good," Martin said. "That's very good." That evening, I drove to the Stamford house. I shouldn't have. There was no practical reason to be there, but I needed to see it empty. Needed to close that chapter completely. I let myself in with my key. The house echoed, every sound amplified by the absence of furniture, of life, of the family I'd tried to build here. I walked through the empty rooms, remembering the day I'd bought it, the joy on Ethan's face when I'd given him the keys, the future I'd imagined. In the master bedroom, I found something they'd left behind. A framed photo, face down on the floor. I picked it up. It was from their wedding day. Ethan and Sloane cutting the cake, both of them laughing, looking young and happy and hopeful. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I set it back down on the floor and walked out. Some things weren't worth keeping. The house sold in 3 weeks for $905,000. $55,000 over asking price in a bidding war between 2 young families. Martin handled the closing while I was in New York, meeting with a nonprofit organization that supported immigrant women starting businesses. I signed the papers remotely, transferred the funds to my account, and didn't look back. The money went straight into a foundation I established that week, the Richard Ashford Fund for Family Accountability. Its mission was to provide legal support and financial literacy education to elderly people being exploited by family members. Helena agreed to serve on the advisory board. Judge Whitmore agreed to consult on cases. Every dollar from that house, the entire $905,000, went into the fund's endowment. I didn't need the money. What I needed was to turn something painful into something purposeful. Richard would have liked that. 2 months after Ethan moved out, I got a letter in the mail. His handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away, unopened. But curiosity won out. "Dear Mom, I'm not going to make excuses or try to explain away what I did. You were right about everything. I've spent my whole life taking your generosity for granted, treating you like an obligation instead of a person, and letting Sloane isolate you because it was easier than standing up to her. The divorce is final. Sloane moved back to Ohio. We're both starting over, which is what we should have done years ago instead of building a life on your money and our own delusions. I'm still in the apartment in Norwalk. It's terrible, just like you probably imagined. The walls are thin, the neighbors are loud, the heat barely works. But it's mine. I pay for it with my salary. No loans, no bailouts, no safety net. And you know what? I sleep better than I have in years. I got a second job, weekends at Home Depot. It's humbling, but it's honest. And I'm learning things, how to actually budget, how to save, how to live within my means. Things I should have learned at 22 instead of 32. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that I'm trying, really trying. Not because I want something from you, but because I finally understand that the person I was is not someone I'm proud of. Helena told me about the foundation, about where the money from the house went. That's exactly the kind of thing Dad would have loved. I hope I can be someone he would have been proud of, too, eventually. I love you, Mom. I know I didn't show it. I know I took you for granted. But I do love you. And I'm sorry it took losing everything to figure out how to say it properly. Ethan. I read that letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer, next to Richard's letter that I still hadn't given to Ethan. I didn't respond, not yet. Words were easy, actions took time. 3 months became 6 months became a year. I heard updates, mostly through Helena, who Ethan had started volunteering with at a community health fair. He was still working both jobs, still living in that apartment, still, apparently, trying to figure out how to be the person he should have been all along. I saw him once, by accident, at a grocery store in Stamford. He was in the produce section, carefully comparing prices on apples, putting the expensive ones back and choosing the cheaper variety. He looked tired, older. But there was something different in his face, a kind of focus, a presence that I'd never seen before. He saw me too. Our eyes met across the vegetable displays. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he gave me a small nod. Not a plea, not an expectation, just an acknowledgement. I nodded back and continued shopping. Small steps. That's all either of us could manage. On the first anniversary of my fall, Helena called me. "Mrs. Ashford, I thought you should know. Ethan came by the hospital today. He brought flowers for the nurses' station and a donation for the Patient Assistance Fund. He asked if he could see the room you were in." "Why?" "He said he needed to remember, to really see the place where his mother almost died while he chose comfort over her life. He stood in that room for 20 minutes, just standing there. Then he thanked me for documenting what he said that day. He said it was the most important favor anyone had ever done for him, even though it destroyed his life." I was quiet for a moment. "How did he seem?" "Genuine," Helena said. "Sad, but genuine. Different than he was a year ago, smaller, maybe, but more solid. Does that make sense?" "Yes," I said. "It does." That evening, I finally called him. He answered on the first ring. "Mom?" "I got your letter," I said, "from 10 months ago." "I didn't expect you to respond," he said. "I just needed you to know." "I know," I said. "Helena told me you visited the hospital today." "I needed to see it," he said quietly. "The room where you were lying, hurt and alone, while I said the worst thing I've ever said in my life. I needed to make it real for myself instead of just an abstract thing I was sorry about. And it made me sick. Physically sick. Standing there, imagining you on that bed, bleeding and in pain, and me just not caring enough to show up. What kind of person does that?" "A person who hadn't learned yet," I said. "But you're learning now." "Am I? Because most days I feel like I'm just surviving. Working, sleeping, trying to pay off debt. Is that growth or is that just existence?" "It's both," I said. "Growth doesn't look dramatic. It looks like choosing the cheaper apples. Like working a second job when you're exhausted. Like standing in a hospital room forcing yourself to face what you did. It's small and unglamorous and hard, but it's real. I saw you," he said. "At the grocery store last month. You saw me too." "I did. You didn't say anything. Neither did you. I didn't know if you wanted me to." I took a breath. "Ethan, I want you to have a life that's yours. Built by you, sustained by you, meaningful because you made it that way. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship I used to dream of. Too much has happened. Too much has broken. But I can see you trying, and that matters." "Does it matter enough?" His voice was small, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "Ask me in another year, or 5, or 10. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep building something real. Keep being honest with yourself. And maybe, we'll find our way to something that works. I can live with maybe, he said. We talked for another 20 minutes, about small things, his jobs, his apartment, a class he was taking at night to improve his qualifications, nothing deep, nothing dramatic. Just conversation between two people who were learning how to be in each other's lives again. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, not quite, but something close to peace. I was 58 years old. I had more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I had a beautiful home, successful businesses, respect in my community. I also had a son who'd rejected me when I needed him most, a marriage that had ended with death, and years of mistakes I could never take back. But I also had clarity. I had boundaries. I had self-respect. And I had the certain knowledge that I'd finally done the hardest thing a parent can do. I'd let go. Whether Ethan would use his freedom to grow or to flounder, I couldn't control. That was his choice, his journey, his life. Mine was here, in this house that no longer echoed with false hopes and desperate compromises. Here, with work that mattered and friendships that were real. Here, with the memory of a husband who'd tried to teach me this lesson while he was alive and who'd finally succeeded from beyond the grave. I went to my desk and pulled out Richard's letter one more time. Read it again. His words familiar now, comforting. Let him fall, Viv. Let him struggle. Let him learn that the sweetest victories are the ones you earn yourself. I'd let him fall. He'd landed hard. And now he was trying to stand back up. That was enough. For now, it was enough. I folded the letter and put it back in the drawer. Someday, when Ethan had truly earned it, I'd give it to him. When he could read his father's words and understand them not as criticism, but as love in its truest form. Until then, I had my own life to live, and for the first time in decades, I was living it for myself. The doorbell rang. Maria, probably, though she had her own key. I went to answer it and found Helena standing there, smiling, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might want some company, she said, and someone to celebrate with. Celebrate what? The foundation just got its first case. An 80-year-old woman whose daughter has been embezzling her pension. Judge Whitmore referred her to us. We're going to help her. I smiled, genuine and warm. Come in. Tell me everything. We sat in my living room, drinking coffee, planning how to help someone who needed it. Making something good from something painful. Turning lessons learned into lessons taught. This was what Richard had meant. This was what it meant to build something real. And somewhere across town, my son was learning the same lesson, one day, one choice, one small victory at a time. Maybe our stories would intersect again. Maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time in my life, I was okay with not knowing. I was free, and that was worth everything I'd lost to get here.